That night, on the banks of the Danube River in Budapest, under the golden lights of the Parliament building, no one knew that Viktor Orban was about to offer Rishi Sunak a dark pact that would change the future of Europe. Two leaders were preparing for history's most dangerous secret meeting, and only one would have the courage to tell the truth. This story is real. This story is about power, fear, and two different visions for Europe. And this story will show you that sometimes the greatest battles are not fought on battlefields, but behind closed doors. It all started 3 weeks ago, in the heart of London, where decisions that shape nations are made every single day. In London, in the Prime Minister's office on Downing Street, Rishi Sunak was looking at the letter on his desk for the third time. The white envelope was stamped with the Hungarian government seal. The edges of the card inside were gold-plated, and the ink was dark red, blood red. The letter read, "Dear Prime Minister Sunak, I invite you as a special guest to the Central European Economic Forum in Budapest. We have urgent matters to discuss. The future of Europe is at risk, and only you and I are brave enough leaders to see the truth. I request a private meeting, outside official channels. Signed, Viktor Orban." His advisor James shifted uncomfortably in his chair and said, "Prime Minister, this smells like a trap." Rishi put the letter down on the desk and replied, "I know, but Orban doesn't send a letter like this for nothing. There's something here, something big." James continued, "You have nothing in common with Orban. He's a..." Rishi cut him off. "An authoritarian nationalist, you mean? The British press writes the same things about me." James insisted, "But you're different." Rishi turned to the window, looked at London's grey sky and said, "Am I really? James, I'm also tightening my immigration policy. I also talk about putting national interests first. Maybe the difference between Orban and me is just how we package it." There was a long silence. James didn't know what to say. Whenever Rishi challenged himself with these kinds of thoughts, it was always like this. He was his own harshest critic, always questioning, always doubting whether he was truly different from the leaders he opposed. Finally, Rishi said in a determined voice, "I'm going, but not alone. Recording devices, security, everything will be there. If Orban is playing a game, I'll be ready." But Rishi didn't know that the game Orban was playing was much darker than he could imagine. And this game would affect not just two leaders, but all of Europe. Because Orban had a trump card, a weapon, and he wouldn't hesitate to use it. 2 weeks later, Budapest. The private jet landed at 6 in the morning. As Rishi's convoy passed through Budapest's quiet streets, the city's historic beauty impressed him. The Danube River sparkled like bronze in the morning sun. The Parliament building rose toward the sky, as if it had emerged from a fairy tale. The chain bridge connected Buda and Pest like a golden necklace. But beneath this beauty, Rishi felt a tension. There was electricity in the air, like the calm before a storm. When he arrived at the Gelyard Hotel, an envelope was waiting for him at the reception. Again that dark red ink. What he read when he opened the envelope changed all his plans. "Welcome, Prime Minister Sunak. Tonight at 10 p.m. we will meet in the private section of the Parliament building. Not an official program. Just you and me. No translator. No advisor. Security cameras off. Trust is required." VO James panicked. "Prime Minister, this is crazy. Cameras off? No witnesses. This violates every protocol, every security guideline we have." Rishi replied calmly. "I know." James asked loudly, "Then why are you going?" Rishi slowly folded the envelope and said, "Because Orban is trying to hide something, and I want to know what it is." James insisted. "What if this is a trap?" Rishi calmly replied, "Then at least I'll have the chance to tell the world the truth." Throughout the day, the official forum continued. Rishi spoke on economic panels, met with Central European leaders. Everyone was polite, professional, but Orban was nowhere to be seen. He was missing all day, as if he was hiding in the shadows, waiting for his moment. Rishi asked his advisors every hour, "Any word from Orban?" The answer was always the same, "No, sir." It was as if the Hungarian Prime Minister was deliberately making Rishi wait. This was a psychological game, a show of power, a test of patience. At 9:45 in the evening, Rishi left the hotel. The security team surrounded the car, but Rishi paused and said, "I'm going alone." The security chief replied in shock, "Prime Minister, this is against procedure. We cannot allow this." Rishi interrupted firmly, "This is an order." The security team looked at each other. None of them could object. They knew that when Rishi Sunak made a decision, there was no changing his mind. And so Rishi Sunak, alone, in the dark streets of Budapest, began walking toward what was perhaps the most dangerous political meeting in history. There was almost no one on the streets. just occasional taxis passing by and night birds. Rishi checked the small recording device in the inner pocket of his jacket. It was working. He took a deep breath. Everything he had learned in 30 years, all his financial intelligence, all his political instincts were telling him, turn back. But something stronger was pulling him forward, the need to know the truth. Because Rishi Sunak knew one thing: in politics, the most dangerous thing is not your enemies. It's the secrets they hide. Budapest Parliament, 10 p.m. at night. The building was empty, almost like a ghost. Rishi followed the instructions and entered through a side corridor. The marble stairs curved upward into a labyrinth. The lights were dim. There was no electric light, only candlelight, as if he had returned to the Middle Ages. The walls bore paintings of Hungary's historic battles, victories, defeats, blood and glory. Each painting told a story of a nation that had survived against impossible odds. Rishi climbed the stairs slowly. Each step echoed. In his mind, a voice whispered, "You're walking into a trap." But another voice replied, "Sometimes you have to walk into the trap to expose it." Finally, he reached a massive double door, wood, carved, historical. The door was ajar. Inside, a large meeting room. Historical war paintings of Hungary on the walls. A single table in the middle. And on the other side of the table, Viktor Orban. In his 60s, thick hair, sharp intelligence in his eyes, but at the same time, a heavy lust for power. He was one of those people. Authority was just a tool. The goal was to stay in power forever. "Prime Minister Sunak," he said, standing up. "Welcome, Prime Minister Orban." They shook hands. Orban's hand was cold, his grip firm, calculated. "Please sit, wine." "No thank you." Orban smiled. Always like a businessman. Disciplined. "I like that." Rishi sat down, waiting silently. Orban was the one who would direct the game. He would just watch. Orban slowly turned his wine glass and said, "I'm going to ask you a question, Prime Minister Sunak. And please, be very honest. I'm listening. Do you believe that Europe is finished?" Rishi raised his eyebrows. "What do you mean? The European Union? Liberal values, open borders, multiculturalism, all this dream, do you think it's really working?" Rishi didn't answer immediately. He knew this was a test. Orban continued, "Let me tell you something, Prime Minister. Europe is dying, and what's killing it is its own idealism. In the 1990s, when the Berlin Wall fell, we thought the West had won. Communism was over. Democracy had triumphed. But we forgot one thing. Not all cultures are equal. Not all civilizations share the same values." Rishi remained silent, his face unreadable. "Now look," Orban continued, his voice gaining intensity. "In Paris, in London, in Berlin, who lives there? Communities that don't integrate, groups trying to enforce their own laws, immigration waves that destroy European identity." Rishi's jaw tightened, but his facial expression didn't change. "You know it too," Orban said, leaning forward. "You're experiencing the same problems in Britain. Do you remember your Rwanda program? The plan to send immigrants to third countries? The liberals attacked you, but you were right. My program respected human rights." Orban laughed, but it was a bitter laugh. "Human rights? Prime Minister, human rights are a luxury. And luxury is only for rich and powerful societies. Weak societies perish by making excuses about human rights." Rishi leaned forward. "Prime Minister Orban, did you call me here for a philosophical debate?" "No." Orban put a file on the table. Thick, black. On it was only one symbol, a map of Europe, but covered with red lines. "I'm offering you an alliance." "What kind of alliance?" Rishi asked, his eyes fixed on the file. "An alliance of realistic leaders," Orban replied. He opened the file slowly, deliberately. Inside were maps, documents, statistics. Britain, Hungary, Poland, Italy, some parts of the Netherlands. If we unite, we create a new bloc within the EU. For what purpose? To save Europe. To save it from liberal elites. To save it from Brussels bureaucrats. And to save it from uncontrolled immigration. Rishi looked at the file carefully. The first page was a policy manifesto titled, "Vision for a New Europe." Complete closure of borders. Zeroing of immigrant quotas. Laws to protect national identities. Assimilation policies for minority cultures. Limiting Brussels' powers. Financial support for nationalist governments. Rishi felt his stomach tighten. This wasn't just policy. This was a blueprint for something much darker. He turned the page. On the second page was a budget. Billions of euros. But what caught his eye was the source line. Private funds, Russian capital, Chinese investments. His heart raced. You're taking money from external powers. Orban shrugged casually. My friend, money is money. What matters is what you use it for. And we will use it to make Europe great again. This is treason, Rishi said quietly. No, Orban said, his voice hardening. This is pragmatism. You were a financier too. You worked at Goldman Sachs. You understand how the world really works. Money always comes before morality. You know that too. Rishi stood up abruptly. I don't think I need to stay here. Sit down. No. Orban's eyes froze like ice. Sit down, Prime Minister Sunak. Because if you walk out of this room, tomorrow morning the press will announce that you had a secret meeting with Orban, but hid the details. Speculation will begin. Your government in Britain will be questioned. Your party will demand answers. Are you blackmailing me? Rishi asked, his voice steel. No. I'm showing you the facts. This is how politics works at the highest level. You know this. Rishi slowly sat back down. His mind was racing, because he knew that right now, one wrong move could end his career. But worse, maybe Orban was right. Maybe this was just how the world worked. But deep inside, another voice said, no, this is not how it has to be. Orban continued, his voice softer now, almost fatherly. Look, I understand you. You were raised in British gentlemanliness. Winchester College, Oxford, Goldman Sachs. You were always taught rules. But let me tell you a truth from Central Europe. Rules only apply to the powerful. The weak follow rules. The strong make them. That's a lie, Rishi said. Is it? Orban turned another page. There was a photograph. The 2015 European migration crisis. Thousands of people at train stations, on roads, chaos and desperation everywhere. Do you remember? Orban asked. Angela Merkel said, Wir schaffen das. We can do it. She took 1 million refugees into Germany. And what happened? Germany is standing, Rishi replied. Germany was torn apart. Orban raised his voice, losing his composure for the first time. Now there are parallel societies on the streets of Berlin. People who don't integrate, groups trying to enforce their own laws. Merkel divided her own country into colonies. She destroyed German identity. Rishi took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. Prime Minister Orban, I'm not against immigration. I'm against uncontrolled immigration. There's a difference. No, Orban said coldly. There's no difference. Because control can only be achieved by completely closing the borders. The moment you open the door even slightly, the flood comes. You cannot control water once the dam breaks. This is inhumane, Rishi said. Humanity. Orban laughed bitterly. Rishi, you come from a wealthy family. Have you ever waited at borders? Have you ever starved? Have you ever watched your culture disappear? No, but I have. I grew up under communism, under Russian oppression. I watched as my country was controlled by foreign powers, and I learned that to survive, compassion is a luxury. Survival comes first. Everything else is secondary. Rishi saw something in Orban's eyes he hadn't noticed before. Not just a lust for power, a real fear, a historical trauma. The fear of a small nation that had been invaded, occupied and oppressed for centuries. You really believe this, don't you? Rishi said slowly, yes, and one day you will believe it too, because Britain faces the same threat. Your culture, your identity, everything that makes Britain British is under attack. And you're too polite to fight back. Orban opened the last page of the file. There was a table. European demographic projections, 2050. Britain 35% white minority. France, 40% Muslim population. Germany, 50% citizens of immigrant origin. Are these statistics accurate? Rishi asked. Yes, Orban replied. United Nations and Eurostat data, official numbers. And you tell me, Prime Minister, is this still Europe or something else? Is this the continent our ancestors built? Rishi looked at the table carefully. The numbers were real. The data was legitimate. But the conclusions, the interpretation, that was manipulated. These numbers may be real, Rishi said carefully, but your interpretation is wrong. Diversity is not a threat, it's an opportunity. It's what makes societies stronger, more innovative, more resilient. Diversity is a lie. Orban slammed his fist on the table, making the wine glass shake. Diversity only means weak cultures being swallowed by strong cultures. And I will not allow Hungarian culture to disappear. I will not be the leader who presides over the death of my nation. There was a long silence. Rishi saw Orban trembling. Not from anger, but from genuine fear. A deep existential fear. You're trying to protect yourself, Rishi said, for the first time with real softness in his voice. Your own identity. Your people's survival. Yes, Orban said quietly. And you need to do the same, before it's too late. At that moment, Rishi had to make a choice. Either he would join Orban's fear, accept his dark vision of Europe's future, or he would stand against him. But before he made his choice, Orban said one more thing, and this changed everything. There's one more thing, Rishi. Orban took a USB drive from the inner pocket of his jacket. What is this? Rishi asked suspiciously. Proof, Orban said with a slight smile. Proof of what? Orban placed the USB on the table and pushed it toward Rishi. Proof that Brussels EU bureaucrats are systematically sabotaging nationalist governments. Emails, leaks, private deals, secret agreements to undermine democratic elections in member states. Rishi looked at the USB drive. He didn't touch it. The small device sat on the table like a grenade. If you take this USB and leak it to the press in Britain, Orban continued, there will be an earthquake within the EU. People will see Brussels' true face. The corruption, the manipulation, the lies they've been told about European unity. Why should I do this? Rishi asked. Because you did Brexit, Orban replied. Britain is no longer in the EU, but you're still on the European continent. And Europe's future is your future, your children's future. Rishi reached for the USB. His fingertips touched the cold plastic surface. For a moment, he imagined what would happen if he took it. The power it would give him, the political capital, the ability to reshape European politics. Then he pulled his hand back. No, Orban was surprised. What? I'm not falling for this game. This isn't a game, Orban said, his voice rising. This is real. This is the truth. Rishi stood up slowly. Maybe it's real, but your truth is not my truth, and I won't be part of your manipulation. Rishi, you're missing an opportunity. No, Rishi said firmly. I'm refusing to participate in a conspiracy. There's a difference. Orban also stood up. Two leaders face to face. Between them was only a table, but it felt like a chasm separating two completely different worlds. You're not a fool, Orban said, his voice now cold and calculating. But you're a slave to your ideals. And ideals don't win elections. Fear does. Power does. If ideals make me a slave, Rishi said quietly, then I don't want to be free. Not your version of freedom anyway. Orban's face darkened. Get out. I'm already leaving. Rishi walked to the door. He put his hand on the handle. Then he turned back one last time. Prime Minister Orban, I'll tell you something. Maybe you're right. Maybe Europe is really changing. Maybe demographic transformations are really happening. Maybe your fears have some basis in reality. But I know one thing with absolute certainty. Civilizations built on fear never last. They crumble from within, because fear eats away at the soul of a nation until there's nothing left but hatred and paranoia. And I refuse to lead my country down that path. Orban smiled, but it was a bitter, sad smile. Then we'll see, Prime Minister Sunak. In 10 years, when your London looks nothing like the London you grew up in, when the British flag means something different than it does today, you'll remember this conversation, and you'll realize I was right. Rishi said nothing. He simply opened the door and walked out into the dark corridor. But when he stepped outside into the cold Budapest night, it wasn't all over, because Orban hadn't played his last card yet. And that card would be enough to destroy Rishi's career, his reputation, everything he had worked for. Because what Rishi didn't know was that the entire meeting had been recorded. Every word, every gesture, every moment of doubt. And Orban was already preparing to use it. The hidden cameras in the ornate walls had captured everything. And by morning, the world would see a very different version of what had happened in that room. A version carefully edited, strategically manipulated, designed to make Rishi Sunak look like the villain. The game wasn't over. In fact, it had just begun. The next morning, as Rishi's plane touched down in London, his phone exploded with notifications, hundreds of messages, missed calls, urgent emails. Something had happened while he was in the air. James met him at the airport, his face pale. Prime Minister, we have a situation, a big one. What happened? Rishi asked. Hungarian news agencies ran a story an hour ago. They're saying you rejected European cooperation. That you told Orban Britain must go alone. That's not what happened, Rishi said immediately. I know, sir. But they have video. Rishi stopped walking. Show me. James pulled out his tablet. The video was already viral. It showed Rishi in the Parliament building, but the audio was clearly edited. His words, "I'm not falling for this game," had been cut and spliced to sound like, "I'm not joining European cooperation." The context was completely removed. It looked damning. The British press had already picked it up. The Guardian, Sunak's dangerous isolation policy. Daily Mail, has the Prime Minister turned his back on our allies? The Times, secret Budapest meeting raises questions. BBC, Sunak under fire for mystery Hungary trip. On social media, hashtag Sunak Explain was trending worldwide. Political opponents were already calling for his resignation. Even members of his own party were expressing concern. How did this happen? Rishi asked, his voice tight with controlled anger. The intelligence chief replied via phone. Prime Minister, there were hidden cameras in the meeting room. Orban recorded everything. He told me there were no cameras, Rishi said. He lied, sir. It was a setup from the beginning. Rishi felt a surge of anger, but he pushed it down. Anger was a luxury he couldn't afford right now. He needed to think strategically. Back at Downing Street, Rishi convened an emergency meeting with his senior staff. The situation room was tense. What are our options? Rishi asked. Communications Director Priya spoke first. There are two paths, Prime Minister. Path 1, we stay silent. Let the story die down naturally. Issue a bland statement saying it was a private diplomatic meeting. Path 2, we tell the complete truth. Everything that happened in that room. If I tell the truth, Rishi said slowly, I have to reveal Orban's offer. The secret alliance. The foreign funding. Yes, sir, Priya confirmed. Then the world learns about the plan to create an authoritarian bloc within Europe. Exactly. There was a long silence. Everyone in the room understood the weight of this decision. Telling the truth meant starting a diplomatic crisis. It meant exposing corruption at the highest levels. It meant making powerful enemies. But staying silent meant living with a lie. Rishi stood up and walked to the window. He looked out at London, the city he loved, the country he served. He thought about his mother, who had always told him, choose the right thing, not the easy thing. He thought about his daughters, who would one day ask him, what did you do when it mattered? You know, Rishi said quietly, turning back to his team. My mother once told me something. She said, Rishi, life will always put you between two choices, the easy one and the right one. You must always choose the right one, even if it costs you everything. Priya smiled slightly. What are you going to do, Prime Minister? Rishi's eyes were clear now, determined. We're holding a press conference. Tonight, 8 p.m., live broadcast. I'm going to tell the world exactly what happened in that room. Everything. No filters. No spin. Just the truth. Sir, James interjected. This could end your premiership. Then it ends, Rishi replied. But it ends with my integrity intact, and that's worth more than any political career. Within hours, the world exploded with reaction. The unedited audio was released. Every word, every threat, every manipulation. News organizations across Europe began in-depth analysis. The headlines told the story. Orban scandal. Secret alliance with foreign powers exposed. Sunak's courage may have saved Europe. Hungarian Prime Minister faces calls to resign. Recording reveals shocking blackmail attempt. In Budapest, the reaction was immediate and powerful. Thousands of Hungarians took to the streets. They had been lied to by their own leader. Protesters carried signs. Orban out. Hungary deserves better. No to authoritarianism. The Hungarian parliament erupted in chaos. Opposition parties demanded an immediate vote of no confidence. Even members of Orban's own party began to distance themselves. Nobody wanted to be associated with what had been exposed. Within 72 hours, Viktor Orban announced his resignation. He gave a brief statement, claiming he had been misunderstood, that his intentions were good, that he was a victim of a political conspiracy, but nobody believed him anymore. The evidence was too clear. The truth was too obvious. He had been caught, and there was no way to spin it. In London, a week later, Rishi sat in his office at Downing Street. The initial media frenzy had calmed. Now came the analysis, the long-term assessment. His advisor Priya came in with the latest polls. Prime Minister, you need to see these numbers. Tell me, Rishi said, bracing himself. Your approval rating in Britain has risen to 68%, the highest it's been since you took office. Across Europe, you're being called a hero. The German Chancellor personally called to thank you. Rishi shook his head slowly. I'm not a hero. I just did what anyone should do. But that's exactly why people are responding, Priya said. Because in a world where politicians constantly compromise their values, you didn't. You showed that principles still matter. Later that evening, Rishi received a letter. It wasn't from a world leader or a political ally. It was from someone he had never met. A simple white envelope with a Hungarian postmark. He opened it carefully. Inside was a handwritten note. Dear Prime Minister Sunak, you don't know me. I'm a university student in Budapest. I was in the streets when Orban resigned. I wanted to thank you, not because you destroyed a politician, but because you showed my generation that truth still matters. In a world of lies, you chose honesty. In a world of fear, you chose courage. Because of you, we believe change is possible. We're building a new Hungary now, a better one. Thank you for showing us it can be done. The letter wasn't signed, just truth written in the corner. Rishi put the letter in his desk drawer. Next to it was another letter, yellowed with age, from his mother, written years ago before she passed away. He had kept it all this time, reading it whenever he felt lost. He opened it again now, reading the familiar words. My dear Rishi, if you ever feel lost, remember this. The world will try to make you choose between what's easy and what's right. Always choose right, even if it costs you everything. Because at the end of your life, you won't remember the money or the power. You'll remember the moments you stood for something bigger than yourself. Love always, Mum. Rishi closed the letter, his throat tight. He looked at the photos on his desk. His wife Akshata, his daughters Krishna and Anushka, smiling at the camera. This was why he did it. Not for glory or history books, but for them, so they could grow up in a world where truth still mattered, where leaders were measured not by their power but by their character, where doing the right thing wasn't considered naive but necessary. That night, Rishi did something unusual. He took a walk through London, alone, no security detail, just him and the city. He walked past Parliament, along the Thames, through streets where ordinary people lived ordinary lives. A woman in her 60s recognized him. Oi, you're the Prime Minister. Rishi smiled. I am. She stepped closer, her face serious. What you did in Budapest, that took real guts. My husband served in the war. He always said, all it takes for evil to win is for good people to do nothing. You did something. Thank you. Within hours, the world exploded with reaction. The unedited audio was released. Every word, every threat, every manipulation. News organizations across Europe began in-depth analysis. The headlines told the story. Orban scandal. Secret alliance with foreign powers exposed. Sunak's courage may have saved Europe. Hungarian Prime Minister faces calls to resign. Recording reveals shocking blackmail attempt. In Budapest, the reaction was immediate and powerful. Thousands of Hungarians took to the streets. They had been lied to by their own leader. Protesters carried signs. Orban out. Hungary deserves better. No to authoritarianism. The Hungarian parliament erupted in chaos. Opposition parties demanded an immediate vote of no confidence. Even members of Orban's own party began to distance themselves. Nobody wanted to be associated with what had been exposed. Within 72 hours, Viktor Orban announced his resignation. He gave a brief statement, claiming he had been misunderstood, that his intentions were good, that he was a victim of a political conspiracy, but nobody believed him anymore. The evidence was too clear. The truth was too obvious. He had been caught, and there was no way to spin it. In London, a week later, Rishi sat in his office at Downing Street. The initial media frenzy had calmed. Now came the analysis, the long-term assessment. His advisor Priya came in with the latest polls. Prime Minister, you need to see these numbers. Tell me, Rishi said, bracing himself. Your approval rating in Britain has risen to 68%, the highest it's been since you took office. Across Europe, you're being called a hero. The German Chancellor personally called to thank you. Rishi shook his head slowly. I'm not a hero. I just did what anyone should do. But that's exactly why people are responding, Priya said. Because in a world where politicians constantly compromise their values, you didn't. You showed that principles still matter. Later that evening, Rishi received a letter. It wasn't from a world leader or a political ally. It was from someone he had never met. A simple white envelope with a Hungarian postmark. He opened it carefully. Inside was a handwritten note. Dear Prime Minister Sunak, you don't know me. I'm a university student in Budapest. I was in the streets when Orban resigned. I wanted to thank you, not because you destroyed a politician, but because you showed my generation that truth still matters. In a world of lies, you chose honesty. In a world of fear, you chose courage. Because of you, we believe change is possible. We're building a new Hungary now, a better one. Thank you for showing us it can be done. The letter wasn't signed, just truth written in the corner. Rishi put the letter in his desk drawer. Next to it was another letter, yellowed with age, from his mother, written years ago before she passed away. He had kept it all this time, reading it whenever he felt lost. He opened it again now, reading the familiar words. My dear Rishi, if you ever feel lost, remember this. The world will try to make you choose between what's easy and what's right. Always choose right, even if it costs you everything. Because at the end of your life, you won't remember the money or the power. You'll remember the moments you stood for something bigger than yourself. Love always, Mum. Rishi closed the letter, his throat tight. He looked at the photos on his desk. His wife Akshata, his daughters Krishna and Anushka, smiling at the camera. This was why he did it. Not for glory or history books, but for them, so they could grow up in a world where truth still mattered, where leaders were measured not by their power but by their character, where doing the right thing wasn't considered naive but necessary. That night, Rishi did something unusual. He took a walk through London, alone, no security detail, just him and the city. He walked past Parliament, along the Thames, through streets where ordinary people lived ordinary lives. A woman in her 60s recognized him. "Oi, you're the Prime Minister." Rishi smiled. "I am." She stepped closer, her face serious. "What you did in Budapest, that took real guts. My husband served in the war. He always said, all it takes for evil to win is for good people to do nothing. You did something. Thank you." 3 months later, Rishi was invited to speak at Oxford University, his alma mater. The historic hall was packed with students, professors, and journalists. Everyone wanted to hear from the man who had stood up to Viktor Orban and won. Rishi stepped up to the podium with no notes, just his thoughts and his truth. "I've been asked many times," he began, "why did you do it? Why did you risk your career, your reputation, your political future to oppose Orban? The answer is simple. Because some things are more important than careers. When I sat in that room in Budapest, facing a man who represented everything I opposed, I had a choice. I could have stayed silent, taken the USB drive, used it for political advantage, built an alliance that would have made me powerful, influential, untouchable, but I would have had to sell my soul. And the price was too high. Let me tell you something about real power," Rishi continued. "Real power doesn't come from alliances with authoritarians. It doesn't come from fear, manipulation, or blackmail. Real power comes from standing alone when everyone else sits down, from speaking truth when silence is safer, from choosing right when wrong is easier." A young woman in the audience raised her hand. "Prime Minister, do you have any regrets? Losing allies? The criticism you faced?" Rishi smiled, "Not for a single second. Because I can look my daughters in the eye and tell them the truth, and that's worth more than any political alliance could ever be." Another student stood. "But sir, aren't you being idealistic? In the real world, don't we have to compromise sometimes?" Rishi's expression grew thoughtful. "There's a crucial difference between compromise and capitulation. Compromise is finding middle ground on policy, tax rates, budget allocations, trade agreements. I compromise on those things every day. But capitulation is abandoning your core values, and I will never compromise on human dignity." The applause was loud and sustained. After the speech, a young Hungarian student approached him, her eyes red from crying. She handed him a photograph. It showed thousands of people in Budapest streets, holding signs. One sign read in English, "Thank you, Sunak, for showing us courage matters." "Prime Minister," she said, her voice shaking, "I'm from Budapest. I was there during the protests after Orban resigned. We didn't know if anyone cared about us. We felt so alone, but you showed us we weren't. You gave us hope." Rishi looked at the photograph, overwhelmed. "You gave yourselves hope," he said gently. "I just witnessed your courage. You did the hard work." That night, Rishi returned to his hotel room and called his wife. "How was the speech?" Akshata asked. "Good," he replied. But something happened after. He told her about the Hungarian student, about the photograph, about the realization that his choice in Budapest had created ripples far beyond what he'd imagined. After a thoughtful pause, Akshata said, "You know what your mother would say if she were here." Rishi smiled. "What?" "That you made her proud. That you chose character over convenience. That you proved good people can still make a difference." Rishi closed his eyes, feeling the weight and the lightness of that truth. "I hope so. I really hope so." The next morning, as Rishi returned to London and to the endless grind of daily politics, he carried something new with him. Not arrogance or pride, but quiet certainty. The certainty that his choices mattered, that truth still had power, that one person, in one moment, could change the course of history. And as he walked into Downing Street that morning, past the famous Black Door, past the cameras and reporters, he thought about what lay ahead. There would be other Viktor Orbáns, other dark pacts offered in secret rooms, other moments where the easy path and the right path would diverge. But Rishi Sunak now knew which path he would always choose. The story of Rishi Sunak and Viktor Orban is more than a political tale. It's a reminder that in a world of compromise, character still matters. In a world of fear, courage still inspires. In a world of lies, truth still prevails. The question isn't whether you'll face these choices. You will. The question is, what will you choose? Will you choose the easy path or the right one? Because that choice defines not just who you are, but what kind of world we all live in. And that's a choice worth getting right.